The physical clean-up after last night's siege was well underway this morning. The political one and the reckoning will take much longer and is fraught with peril. This was the scene in the dead of night, as the riot police closed in on Lechko, Hong Kong's assembly. Some demonstrators desperate to get out, perhaps fearing arrest. Others determined to hang on. Pinch yourself. This siege was the most brazen affront to the power of Beijing since Tiananmen Square. And compared to the gentle calls for democracy of 30 years ago, this was a fearless middle finger to the Middle Kingdom. And this is what they left behind. An assembly chamber festooned with the kind of anti-Beijing graffiti that will land you in a labor camp in China, possibly for life. The emblem of Hong Kong smudged with rage. The territory's leaders lined up as mugshots. Insult added to injury. No wonder the besieged chief executive, Carrie Lam, ended the worst day in office she ever had with a news conference at 4 a.m.
This is something that we should seriously condemn, because nothing is more important than the rule of law in Hong Kong. So I hope the community at large will agree with us that with these violent acts that we have seen, it is right for us to condemn it.
As the authorities took control overnight, some key questions. Why did the police apparently stand by and allow the protesters to storm Lechko yesterday? Were they afraid of a confrontation, or did they set a trap that the demonstrators were stupid enough to wade into? And who were the people leading the charge and doing the ramming? Some protesters suggest that they were paid agents provocateurs, deployed to give the protests a bad name. There is no evidence to suggest as much. But the right balance between crime and punishment is now crucial, and even pro-Beijing legislators were treading carefully, and not just because of the broken glass.
As Lechko president, I strongly condemn the serious violence that undermines the core values of Hong Kong.
The message on state television from Beijing was harsher. The demonstrators trampled on the rule of law, she said, and the violent criminals will be brought to justice. On the streets of Beijing, where the students of Hong Kong are both decried as spoiled brats and quietly envied for their freedom from fear, the views were mixed.
I haven't heard anything. If it didn't get to the hot topics on Weibo, then I wouldn't see it.
It is absolutely forbidden, and it shouldn't happen. Hong Kong is an inalienable part of the People's Republic of China. Some citizens with evil intentions took to the streets and made some trouble. It's an insult towards China. They are guilty of a crime for which even death cannot atone.
The violence is easier to condemn, but this is what really freaks Beijing out. The masses marching peacefully and fearlessly for more democracy in the canyons of Hong Kong. The ability to organize flash crowds on such a scale, and the contagion of liberty it sends to mainland China and to Taiwan. What happens in Hong Kong no longer stays in Hong Kong.
Well, a short time ago, I spoke to Bonnie Leung, one of the organisers of the recent protests, and I asked her if she knew who those protesters were who stormed the legislature.
I do not know who they are, because the whole protest by these young protesters are voluntary, and I believe that they organize themselves through some social media at the internet. And all the protesters stand as one. Although I may not agree with their strategy, I totally understand why they are so despair and why they're so desperate.
Do you not see why this could be a mistake?
Well, as I said, I may not agree with their strategy.
I mean, you say you may not agree with them. Do you agree with them or not?
If I were in their position, I would do it differently. But I do not accept anyone, especially the government, to say anything ill about them, especially when the government is saying that they are mobs and they are violent. And I totally do not agree with that. Of course, we have to look into the whole story, and no one should blame these young protesters before they blame the tyranny.
Are you disappointed with the reaction of the UK government? A former cabinet minister today, Andrew Mitchell, has condemned the use of the Union flag by some of the protesters who went into Legco today. Is that the kind of message you expect to hear from Britain?
What I really want is that the UK government to act according to their responsibility. And as I heard, Jeremy Hunt is saying that he is with Hong Kong people. And I really hope that politicians like him would do a lot more than they are doing now.
Well, I also spoke to Nixie Lam, a Hong Kong district councillor with the pro-Beijing Democratic Alliance Party. And I asked if she understood the desperation people feel about attempts to erode their freedom.
I don't think it's a problem of freedoms at the moment. It's a problem of misunderstanding. A lot of the people still, at this moment, doesn't really understand the bill at all. So, and it's wrapped around freedom, wrapped around untrust and everything. It's a very complicated issue. You can't just put it down into one word, freedom.
Don't they just need to drop the bill?
Drop the bill doesn't help anything. I mean, like, it's already stopped the procedure. It's not going to happen.
But the threat is there, isn't it? And that's why there are thousands of people on the streets and great fear in Hong Kong at the moment that this is the beginning of the end of two systems.
What's happened is, over the last few months, a lot of the lies that was happening, coming out from the legislature's mouth, trying to misguide people, trying to mislead people that this law will just strip every freedom, every bit of freedom out of Hong Kong people is totally wrong.
A lot of those protesters are saying,
yes,
no, we do not trust the system to protect us from being sent to a prison in China.
I can't request everyone to trust the system right now because they just don't trust anything that is related to China, or there's even a gigantic hate towards any China-labeled stuff, like China products, any Chinese tourists.
What do you think is going to happen now?
I think the government needs to step up a bit, like not just announcing some sort of announcement. Maybe they should just come up more upfront and just talk about the issue.
Do you think Carrie Lam should be replaced?
Who can come out? I mean, Carrie Lam should stay. My view is Carrie Lam should stay and deal with her own mess.